Have you ever been embarrassed so badly you felt it in your chest before it reached your head? That was me, standing in my wife's parents' backyard, smoke from the grill in the air, a warm beer in my hand, surrounded by P.O. Brooke Sullivan raised her glass, smiled like she already knew the ending and said, "If your wife ever cheats on you with her boss, promise you won't just whimper in the corner like a lost puppy." The laughter came fast, too confident. Then I looked at Lauren, my wife. She didn't defend me. She didn't stop it. She laughed along with them. That smile hit me like a gut punch. And in that exact moment, I realized something important. This wasn't a joke. It was a message. If you've ever wondered what a man does after a moment like that, hit subscribe, leave a comment, and stay with me. Because what I did next changed everything. I didn't flinch. I kept my face still and my hand wrapped around that warm beer like it was something solid in a room that suddenly wasn't. Everyone else was laughing, but I wasn't hearing jokes anymore. I was hearing a verdict. I started watching them the way I watch a job site when something feels unsafe. Brooke's grin was loudest. Her husband laughed without looking at me, like he didn't want to see my reaction up close. My father-in-law's chuckle had that boys will be boys comfort to it. My mother-in-law smiled like this was harmless family fun. And then there were the ones who didn't laugh. Those are the ones that stuck with me. The quick glance away, the sip of a drink at the exact wrong moment, the stiff shoulders. People don't avoid eye contact when they think you're equal. They avoid it when they think you're beneath them. Lauren sat there with that smooth real estate smile, polished and effortless, like she could sell a house with termites and call it character. She didn't defend me. She didn't even blink. I swallowed the bitterness, let it burn on the way down, and gave them space to keep talking, because I wanted to hear how far they'd go. Maybe that's my problem. I've never been a performer. I'm a civil engineer, city, county, public works. I build things that have to hold up when nobody's watching. Roads, drainage, retaining walls, the unglamorous stuff that keeps your day from falling apart. I'm the guy who cares if the numbers line up, if the structure is sound, if the foundation can take the weight. I live like a lot of men my age live. Pay the mortgage on time, keep the lights on, fix what breaks before it becomes a crisis. I don't need applause for it. I just need it to work. And I guess somewhere along the way, I confused steady with safe. I thought if I stayed reliable, if I stayed calm, if I kept showing up, my marriage would stay standing too. But there I was, in a backyard full of family, feeling 2 inches tall while everyone laughed like I wasn't even in the room. What hurt wasn't Brooke's mouth. It was Lauren's silence, her smile, the way she let them turn my home into a stage and me into the punchline. And once you see that, you start replaying the last 6 months, looking for every crack you ignored. What I didn't know yet was that the cracks weren't accidental. Once you see a crack, you start hunting for the rest of them. Sitting there in that backyard, with laughter bouncing off the patio like it belonged to me, my mind slid backward through the last 6 months like a hand running over a rough wall, finding every spot that wasn't smooth. Lauren's late-night showings started out believable. Real estate is weird hours. I didn't question it the first time, or the 10th. But then the details got sloppy. Texts that didn't match the time she got home, the way she'd walk in already showered, hair still damp, like she'd washed off a day that didn't exist. Her phone used to sit on the counter like any normal person's. Then it started living face down. Then it started living locked, like it had something to hide from the man sleeping next to her. I found lingerie in the laundry that I'd never seen before, tags gone, fabric too deliberate to be just for me. In her calendar, there were these clean little gaps every week, the same afternoon, the same empty space. Nothing was proof by itself. But together, something didn't add up. And my gut wasn't whispering anymore. It was screaming red flags. And then someone said a name I'd heard before, just not in this context. While my mind was doing math, Brooke poured more wine and kept the spotlight on me. She had that kind of confidence people get when they think the room is on their side. Then she said it, casual, almost playful, like she was dropping gossip, not a grenade. "Evan Whitmore," she murmured, like everybody should know the name. Lauren's boss. Lauren laughed, and it wasn't nervous. It was proud. Evan's the kind of man who actually makes a woman feel alive, she said, leaning back like she was reviewing a restaurant she'd already decided was 5 stars. They started painting him in money and shine, Porsche, high-end steakhouses, clients, big deals, big energy. The kind of guy who takes up space because he's paid to believe he deserves it. And then came the comparison, because it always does. I was the boring one. Predictable. The guy who organizes, who plans, who doesn't take charge. They said it like stability was a punchline. I kept my face still, but inside, something went cold and clear. Evan Whitmore. I pressed the name into my memory like a thumbprint in wet cement. Because names matter. They're where patterns start to turn into targets. After Evan's name hit the air, the jokes got sharper, like they could smell blood. Brooke kept feeding the room, tossing little lines and watching them land. My brother-in-law piled on. Even people who'd been quiet found a chuckle, like laughter was the cover charge to stay in the circle. I didn't give them anything back. No glare, no argument, just that steady face I've used in meetings when contractors try to sell me shortcuts. I listened. I let every word sink in. Boring. Predictable. No backbone. The kind of husband who'd take it and keep paying the bills. I caught the rhythm of it, the way they paused for laughs, the way Lauren's smile never slipped. It didn't feel random anymore. It felt practiced. Like they were testing how much disrespect I'd swallow before I finally broke. And that's the thing. I didn't break. I measured. I cataloged. I felt something settle inside me, heavy and calm. Tonight wasn't about proving I'm fun. It was about drawing a line. In my head, a blueprint unfolded, clean, precise. Not a bridge, a controlled demolition. I stood up slowly, the way you stand when you don't want to spill anything, beer, anger, or the truth. I set the can down on the table with a kind of carefulness that made the laughter stumble. For a second, nobody spoke. It was like the whole backyard held its breath. "You're right," I said, and my voice surprised even me. Calm. Even. "I am boring." A few smirks tried to survive, but they didn't look as confident anymore. "Boring is the guy who keeps the lights on," I continued, looking straight at Lauren. "Boring is the guy who makes sure there's a roof over our head, the mortgage gets paid, and the life you like doesn't fall apart." Lauren's smile tightened at the corners, like a mask starting to pinch. I nodded once like I was agreeing with the room. "And you know what else boring guys do?" I let the silence stretch just enough to hurt. "We notice patterns. We read fine print. We keep records." I leaned in a fraction. "We keep receipts." She thought receipts were about money. She was wrong. Lauren blinked, quick, sharp, like she'd been slapped without a hand ever touching her. And in that blink, I knew I finally had their attention. That was the moment I decided I wasn't confronting her. I was documenting her. When I said receipts, I didn't mean it like a threat. I meant it like a fact. I pulled my phone out and kept my hand steady, the same way I hold a level when I'm checking a foundation. No shaking, no drama, just truth. "Our joint card," I said, looking around the table, "has been getting swiped at the Marriott downtown." Lauren's smile twitched. "Not once," I added. "Not a mistake. Every Tuesday afternoon. Like clockwork." You could actually feel the backyard change. The grill still hissed. Someone's kid still shrieked in the distance. But at our table, the air went thin. Brooke's eyes narrowed, like she was trying to decide if I was bluffing. My father-in-law stared at the tabletop. My mother-in-law's hand paused halfway to her drink. Lauren went pale in a way makeup can't cover. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "That's not me being paranoid," I said. "That's a pattern." Then I gave Lauren a small, polite nod. "I'm just putting 2 and 2 together." And before anyone could rush in to save her, I scrolled to the next receipt. I turned the screen so the whole table could see it, not just Lauren. A clean little line item, bright as a blade. Tiffany & Company, $800. Date and time stamped like it was proud of itself. I didn't accuse her. I asked the simplest question in the world. "So, did I get a gift?" Lauren went rigid, like her bones locked. For a second it looked like she forgot how to breathe. That real estate smile tried to show up and failed. Her eyes darted, searching for an exit that wasn't there. Brooke's wine glass froze midair. The smirk she'd been wearing all night slipped off her face like it had finally run out of grip. Nobody laughed now. Nobody even coughed. It was like someone reached over and turned the volume knob all the way down. I kept my voice low, almost conversational. "See, this is the thing about being boring," I said. "Boring men notice where the money goes. Boring men keep records." I let the silence sit long enough to sting. Then I looked straight at Lauren. Receipts don't lie. And in that quiet, you could hear exactly what was breaking. Her story, her cover, and the comfort this family had in treating me like I didn't matter. And that was still the smallest number on my screen. People think cheating breaks a marriage. They're wrong. The Tiffany receipt was still glowing on my screen when I let my thumb scroll, slow, deliberate, like I was giving everyone time to catch up. "And then there's our joint savings," I said, the words landing heavier than any insult they'd thrown at me. $43,000. Lauren's throat bobbed. Her eyes flicked to her mother, then back to me, like she could borrow a way out. "You remember when we opened that account?" I asked. "Both signatures for big withdrawals. That's what you told me made it safe." I didn't smile. Funny thing about fine print. Transfers don't count the same way when it's moving to an account in the same name. I turned the screen toward her. A bank confirmation. Time-stamped. Clean. Final. The $43,000 was already sitting in my personal checking account like it belonged there, because legally, on paper, it did. Lauren shot up so fast her chair scraped. "You can't—" I held up a hand. Not angry. Just done. "I can," I said, calm as a building inspector signing off a report. "Perfectly legal." And that's when it hit her. Not the money. The reality. I wasn't the guy they could laugh at and then send back to the corner. I wasn't her doormat anymore. The room was still processing the savings when I kept going, because if you stop in the middle of a demolition, the structure falls the wrong way. "I also canceled the joint cell plan this morning," I said. "Cable too. Landscaping service. All of it." My brother-in-law opened his mouth like he wanted to jump in, but nothing came out. My mother-in-law's hands fluttered, helpless, like she was searching for something polite to say in an ugly moment. "I called the mortgage company," I continued, and I watched Lauren's face tighten. "The house is in my name. If payments stop, they don't call you. They call me." Lauren's dad shifted, suddenly interested in his own hands. Brooke's smile was gone now, completely gone. "And that BMW?" I said, letting my eyes move to the family like a slow sweep of headlights. "The one she said was for business? Someone had to co-sign that. Might want to check what you signed your name to." That's when the panic finally spread. You could feel it crawl across the table, from Lauren to her parents to Brooke, like cold water seeping under a door. I kept my voice level. "This doesn't concern you," I said, "until it does." Brooke's glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the patio stone. The sound was sharp and final, like a reputation cracking in plain daylight. After Brooke's glass shattered, nobody knew what to do with their hands. They were all just sitting there, staring at me like I'd turned into a stranger at my own marriage. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't call anyone names. I didn't need to. The truth was already doing the damage. I picked up my keys and gave them the same polite tone I'd used for years when they made little jokes at my expense. "Thanks for the food," I said, looking at my mother-in-law. "Everything was great. Hope you all have a good night." Lauren's chair scraped again. "Nathan, wait." I finally met her eyes. "Don't come home tonight," I said. Simple. Final. The locks were changed this morning. Her face drained so fast it almost looked unreal. "What are you talking about?" "Your things are in a storage unit," I told her. "Keys where you'll find it." I walked to the gate without rushing, without looking back for approval. When it clicked shut behind me, the yelling started, high, messy, panicked. It rose like a storm hitting a quiet street. I climbed into my boring car, the one that's paid off, and I drove away like I'd been holding my breath for 12 years and finally let it out. The studio was small, one of those places you rent when you're not trying to impress anybody, just trying to survive. Bare walls, cheap blinds, a mattress on the floor, a folding chair. It felt like a job site trailer without the noise. Functional, quiet, honest. I set my keys down and just stood there for a second, listening to the refrigerator hum. No laughter, no comments, no pretending. My chest felt tight, like it didn't know what to do without pressure on it. Then I sat on the folding chair and realized something embarrassing. I could breathe. Not the shallow kind of breathing you do when you're swallowing anger. Real air. The kind that fills your lungs and reminds you you're still here. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. Lauren. Again. And again. Call after call, stacking like missed payments. I watched it light up, vibrate, go quiet, then light up again. I didn't answer. I couldn't let her drag me back into the same script where I explain, forgive, and pay the bill. I flipped it face down the way she used to do, only this time it wasn't secrecy, it was boundaries. I turned on the radio, classic rock, something steady, and let the noise fill the room. It hurt, but underneath the hurt, I felt awake. The next morning there was a knock that didn't sound like trouble. It sounded like someone who knew me. When I opened the door, Mark Reynolds stood there holding 2 coffees and a box of donuts like he was delivering first aid. He stepped inside, took one look around, the mattress, the folding chair, the bare counters, and let out a low whistle. "Man," he said, "this place looks like witness protection." I almost laughed, but it came out tight. Mark had been my friend long enough to hear the difference. He sat down like he owned the silence and waited. So I told him. Not the dramatic version, the real version. The last 6 months, the Tuesday gaps, the locked phone, the hotel charges. The way Lauren laughed at that table like my marriage was a punchline and I was too stupid to get it. Mark didn't interrupt. He just listened, jaw clenched, eyes steady. When I finished, he stared at his coffee for a long beat. "You know what scares me?" he said quietly. "You're enjoying this." I didn't deny it. I couldn't. "I'm not crazy," I told him. "I'm just done being led around." Mark kept looking at me like he was trying to find the guy he'd known for 20 years, the one who'd rather fix a problem than make a scene. I understood it. I didn't feel like myself either. I felt sharper, colder, like something in me had finally stopped bending. "Most guys," I said, "they find out they're being played and they go reckless. Blow up, throw punches, send stupid texts. Then they end up looking like the villain while the real damage gets hidden." I took a breath and kept my voice level. That's not me. I build for a living. I know what holds weight and what doesn't. I know where a structure fails if you weaken the right spot. And over the past months, without even meaning to at first, I'd been collecting the boring things. Statements, call logs, dates, photos, little time-stamped facts that don't care about excuses. A clean paper trail, a foundation of proof. "This isn't about revenge," I told him. "It's about accountability. It's about consequences that match choices." Mark's eyes narrowed. "And you? What's it about for you?" I didn't dodge it. "Self-respect," I said. "I'm taking it back." He shook his head slowly, like that answer cost more than money. And maybe it did. Mark had barely stepped out when my phone started buzzing again. Not her usual contact. Unknown number. For a second I just watched it vibrate on the counter like a trapped insect, and I felt that familiar tug, 12 years of answering, smoothing things over, making it work. Then I picked it up anyway. "County Public Works, this is Nathan," I said, calm and professional, like I was answering a contractor's complaint. The silence on the other end lasted half a heartbeat. Then Lauren exploded, cursing, demanding, talking fast, like if she kept the volume high enough she could drown out reality. She wanted the money back. She wanted to come home. She wanted me to stop acting like a psycho and fix the mess I'd created. I let her run out of fuel. Then I asked, flat and polite, "I'm sorry. Who is this?" She choked on it. I heard the panic slip through the anger, raw and human. "Nathan, don't do this. You know it's me." I kept my voice even. "Oh, Lauren." A pause. "New phone? Cute." That's when she went quiet. Not because she had nothing to say, but because she finally understood. The old script wasn't working anymore. She tried to regain control with the usual line, softer now, almost pleading. "It's not what you think, okay? You're twisting it." I leaned against the counter and stared at the blank wall like it could keep me steady. "Don't," I said, not loud, just sharp. "Don't insult my intelligence." She started talking again. Work stress, misunderstandings, clients, the same foggy excuses that never have timestamps. So I did what I always do when someone lies to my face. I narrowed it down to facts. The Marriott every Tuesday afternoon, I said. The new lingerie that never showed up for me. The gaps in your calendar. The locked phone that used to live on the kitchen counter. The late-night showings where you came home already showered. Her breathing changed. Quick, shallow. Like someone realizing the door behind them is locked. And Evan, I added, letting his name drop cleanly into the silence. Evan Whitmore. That was the moment the line went dead quiet, even though she was still there. Silence tells the truth when people won't. When she finally spoke, her voice was small, almost unfamiliar. What do you want, Nathan? I didn't answer right away because the honest answer wasn't revenge. It was something colder, something final. On the other end of the line, Lauren sounded smaller than I'd ever heard her. It should have made me soften. 12 years ago it would have. But something in me had moved, like a gear catching and locking into place. I don't want anything from you, I said. Not gifts, not apologies, not a story you rehearse until it sounds believable. She swallowed hard. Nathan, please, can we just meet somewhere? Talk like adults? I stared at the scuffed countertop in that empty studio and felt how quiet my life could be if I stopped letting chaos rent space in it. We can handle this the right way, I told her. Quiet, private, minimal damage. I paused. Or we can do it loud, public, with everyone knowing exactly who did what. Her breath hitched. I could hear her mind racing, reaching for a way to make the shame disappear. You're trying to destroy me. No, I said. I'm giving you a choice. She tried one more time, voice turning sweet, the way it did when she needed something. I love you. We can fix this. Counseling, whatever you want. The words landed like bad insulation, thin, useless. Once trust is broken, I said, slow and clear, you don't tape it back together and call it new. Then I set the clock. You have 48 hours, Lauren. Decide how you want this to go. When I hung up, I didn't feel relief. I felt direction. The next morning, I drove to the coffee shop across from Lauren's office. Same kind of place Evan probably grabbed his overpriced espresso. I sat near the window with a plain black coffee and watched the building like it was a site inspection. In and out. Patterns, timing, habit. Evan Whitmore showed up exactly the way Lauren described him, like the world owed him a clear path. Silver Porsche parked front and center, angled just right to catch the sun. Not because it was convenient, because it was a statement. He stepped out, straightened his jacket, and actually checked his reflection in the car door before walking inside. That told me everything I needed to know. Guys like Evan don't fear fists. They fear paperwork, exposure, the kind of truth that sticks to their name and follows them into every room. He wasn't built on character. He was built on image. I watched him disappear into the lobby and felt that same cold clarity settle in. Reputation is a fragile thing, I thought. And Evans was about to meet gravity. Watching Evan walk into that building like he owned the sidewalk gave me a weird kind of focus. I went home and did what I've always done when something feels wrong. I started digging for what's real. Not rumors. Not my buddy heard. Paper. Records. Patterns. Premier Properties wasn't some untouchable empire. It was a mid-size firm with partners, investors, and a public footprint. I pulled corporate filings, looked up who held what stake, who signed what. I read the kind of boring documents most people skip, because boredom is where the truth hides. I checked complaint boards, licensing records, and the quiet little news blurbs nobody remembers 2 days later. Then I started listening. Not stalking, listening. The way men listen at a bar when the conversation drifts from sports to money. A couple of local agents, guys who'd had drinks with Mark, kept using the same phrase about Evan, creative accounting, said with a grin, like it was clever, not dangerous. I wrote down names, departments, the outside firm that handled annual reviews. One detail led to another. Dots started connecting. And then I saw the weak spot. Evan didn't just cheat. He played loose with money. That's where men like him bleed. Once I knew where Evan was soft, I didn't rush. Most people think revenge is a fist. It's not. The cleanest damage comes from letting a system do what it was built to do. once it's pointed in the right direction. Every Thursday night, I take a continuing ed class. Nothing fancy, just professional credits, a room full of tired adults, stale coffee, people trying to keep licenses current. That's where the accident happened. A woman in my class mentioned her dad worked in forensic accounting. Not gossip, just small talk while we packed up our books. I didn't ask for favors. I didn't demand anything. I just said, casual as a man mentioning a pothole on his street. I've heard Premier Properties has some numbers that don't look right. Expense reports, commission splits, stuff that might be worth a second look. She raised an eyebrow. I shrugged like it meant nothing. Probably nothing, I said. But you know how it goes. If it's clean, an audit clears it. If it's not, it doesn't. Then I let it go. No follow-up, no calls, no texts. I went back to my studio and waited. That's when it hit me. Hard and almost peaceful. The strongest move isn't loud. It's the one that doesn't leave your name on it. Just cause, effect, and gravity. I didn't touch Evan. The system did. I didn't hear anything for 2 days, and that silence told me the machine was moving. Then, on a Tuesday morning, my phone rang from another unknown number. The kind of ring that doesn't feel like a conversation, more like a warning. I answered the same way I'd answered Lauren. Calm, professional. Nathan Holloway. A man's voice came through tight as a pulled cable. You think you're funny? What the hell did you do to me? I let a beat pass. Who is this? A sharp exhale. Then he growled his name like it carried weight. Evan Whitmore, Premier Properties, don't play dumb. I looked out the window at the parking lot, at regular people walking their dogs, living normal lives while mine was being ripped down to studs. Evan, I said, like I was meeting him at a neighborhood cookout. What's going on? He started talking fast. Something about internal review, compliance, people asking questions they shouldn't be asking. He said it like he was the victim of bad timing, not the author of a mess. I kept my tone soft. Sounds stressful, I said. Maybe call your lawyer. He went quiet for half a second, long enough for fear to slip through the anger. What do you want? He finally asked. And that was the moment I knew. He felt the ground shifting. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten him. That's what men like Evan expect. Noise, chest thumping, something they can dismiss as emotional. So I gave him the opposite. I don't want anything from you, I said. Not money, not apologies, not a deal. He scoffed, but it sounded forced. Then why are you doing this? Because you already gave me everything I needed, I told him. The truth. He tried to bark back, but I could hear the strain now, the way a confident man sounds when his mask starts slipping. So I pressed gently, like checking a crack in concrete. A guy who sleeps with another man's wife usually has other blind spots, I said. Loose habits, sloppy choices, little shortcuts that feel harmless until somebody shines a light on them. Evan's breathing got louder. Listen, Holloway, I've got friends in this town, important people. I let that hang for a second, then answered like I was genuinely curious. That's great, I said. Let's see how loyal they are when your name starts showing up in the wrong conversations. Silence. Not the kind where someone's waiting to speak. The kind where someone's realizing they might not be able to control what happens next. And in that silence I heard it. Panic, hiding underneath his ego like rot under fresh paint. 2 hours after Evan's call, my phone buzzed again. This time from Brooke. No apology, no, are you okay? Just a message that felt like a summons. Family meeting. Sunday. Everyone will be there. I could picture it without seeing it. Her living room turned into a courtroom. Lauren in the corner with red eyes. Her parents sitting stiff like they were about to handle me. Brooke in the center seat, wearing that confident smile like a badge. Mark called it before I even said the words. They're going to try to dogpile you, he said. Make you feel like the bad guy. Tell you you're being vindictive, manipulative. And he was right. That's how families like theirs stay comfortable, by keeping the blame pointed at the person who finally refuses to play along. I laughed, but it wasn't funny. They still thought I'd fold, still thought I'd show up and apologize for bleeding. I could have ignored it. Let them hold their little meeting without me. But that would have given them room to rewrite the story. So I chose option 3. I was going to show up, quiet, polite, and I was bringing proof. They thought this meeting was about fixing things. It wasn't. That night, I cleared the tiny kitchen counter in my studio and laid everything out like a work order. Photos, bank statements, credit card charges, copies of the lease. The boring stuff people call petty until it's the only thing keeping you from getting buried. I went through it slowly, marking dates with a pen the way I mark measurements on a plan. Tuesday, Marriott. Tuesday, Marriott. Transfers. The Tiffany charge. The gaps in her schedule that used to look like nothing. Now they looked like a map. I didn't write emotional speeches. I wrote questions, simple ones that don't care about tears. Did I receive this gift? Why was our card here? Where did this money go? Then I put it all in one folder, clean and tight, the way I like things when I'm trying not to fall apart. Sunday morning, I put on my charcoal gray suit. Not to impress them, just to remind myself this wasn't a shouting match. It was a reckoning. I checked my collar, looked at my own face in the mirror and said it out loud. No yelling, just facts. Walking to my car, I felt like an engineer stepping onto a site right before the charges go off. Calm on the outside, fully aware of what's about to collapse. Brooke's house was the kind of suburban McMansion that always feels like it's trying too hard. 2-car garage, spotless driveway, big windows that show you just enough to remind you you're being watched. The moment I stepped inside, I knew I'd walked into a setup. They'd arranged the room like a tribunal. Richard and Elaine sat dead center on the couch, shoulders squared, faces tight with that righteous parent energy. Lauren was curled into an armchair off to the side, wrapped up in an oversized sweater like she'd been reduced to a wounded child. Red eyes, puffy face, the whole look what you did to her costume. Brooke sat opposite me, planted in the best chair in the room, posture perfect, lips pressed like she'd already written her closing argument. No one offered me a seat. No one asked how I was doing. They didn't want a conversation. They wanted a surrender. I stayed standing. I didn't fidget. I didn't apologize for breathing. I walked to the coffee table and set my folder down with a soft, controlled tap. And in that small sound, I understood the real point of this meeting. They weren't here for the truth. They were here to make me kneel. Elaine started first, tears ready on cue. "She's falling apart," she said, voice trembling like I'd run her over with my car. "She hasn't eaten. She hasn't slept. How could you do this to her?" Richard leaned forward, chin lifted. "We raised our daughter better than this," he said, then turned that glare on me. "But you're destroying the family's name. You're embarrassing us." Brooke didn't even bother pretending to be gentle. "This is vindictive," she snapped. "Manipulative. You're trying to ruin her life because your ego got bruised." Lauren lifted her head just enough to moan, "You're being cruel, Nathan. You're going too far." Like I'd woken up one day and decided to become a monster for fun. I listened to all of it without interrupting, the same way I listen when someone blames a bridge for collapsing after they cut the supports. When they finally ran out of steam, I looked around the room, at the staged tears, the practiced outrage, the way nobody once said the words cheating or lying. I asked softly, "Are we talking about the same person here?" They blinked. "I'm not doing anything to her," I said, calm and clean. "I'm protecting myself." And for the first time, the room didn't know what to say back. I let their outrage hang in the air for a second, then I turned my attention to Brooke. Not Lauren, Brooke. Because she'd been steering the room since the barbecue, and now she was pretending she was just concerned. I kept my voice low. "Brooke," I said, "when you made that joke, what were you trying to get out of it?" Her mouth twitched into a tight little smile. "Oh my God, Nathan, it was just a joke." I nodded once, slow. "No," I said. "It was a slap in the face, and you know it." Elaine sniffed. Richard shifted like he wanted to interrupt. Lauren stared at the carpet, still playing small. Brooke's eyes stayed on mine, testing whether I'd fold under the pressure of a room full of family. "That joke wasn't about humor," I continued. "It was about respect, about whether I'd accept being treated like I'm less than a man in my own marriage." I paused. "And I'm telling you right now, I'm done accepting it." I reached for the folder on the coffee table. The room went still in a new way, like everybody sensed a door was about to open that couldn't be closed again. Brooke's smile froze, not because she suddenly cared about my feelings, because she knew what was coming next wouldn't be something she could talk her way out of. They came to judge me. I brought evidence. I didn't slam anything down. I didn't dramatize it. I just opened the folder and slid the first stack of photos onto the coffee table like paperwork at a closing. "Marriott downtown," I said. "Tuesday afternoons." Lauren's head snapped up. Her hands started to shake before she even saw the images, like her body recognized the truth faster than her brain could manage. The photos were clear, not grainy, not questionable. Lauren and Evan walking in together, Lauren and Evan leaving later. Same hallway, same time window, different weeks. A pattern, captured frame by frame. Elaine's breath caught so hard it sounded like she'd been punched. She lifted a hand to her mouth, eyes wide, staring at her daughter like she'd never seen her before. Richard's face went red, not with anger at me, at her. At the humiliation he could already feel crawling up his spine. Lauren whispered, Please don't do this." I looked at her, and for a moment I felt the old pull, the instinct to protect her from consequences even when she never protected me. Then I let it go. "Truth isn't cruel," I said softly. "Lies are." And in the silence that followed, I watched the family's story crack. Not with yelling, not with drama, just with evidence. And the sudden, unfamiliar look in their eyes when they realized Lauren wasn't the victim they'd brought me here to punish. The photos did what photos always do. They ended the debate. But people like Brooke don't let go that easily. They look for an angle, a loophole, something they can call misunderstanding. So I gave them something colder than a picture. Numbers. I slid the credit card statements out next, page by page. Restaurants with linen tablecloths, flower orders, jewelry, hotel charges stacked like a second rent, dates, times, amounts, all neat, all boring, all deadly. I didn't accuse. I asked one simple question and let it hang in the room like smoke. "Was I at any of these dinners?" I said. "Any of them?" Lauren's face crumpled. She opened her mouth, but what came out wasn't an answer. It was a soft, broken sound, like air leaking out of something punctured. Elaine stared at the pages as if they might rearrange themselves into something innocent. Richard's jaw worked like he was chewing on rage. Brooke grabbed a statement and flipped through it fast, hands shaking now. The confident tone was gone. She was doing math against her will. I tapped the stack lightly. "Receipts," I said. "Receipts, receipts." Then I looked at all of them, one by one, and I said the sentence I'd swallowed for years. She made me look like a fool. You could feel them wanting it to stop. Not because they cared about me, because the truth was getting too ugly for their living room. But I wasn't there to make it comfortable. I was there to make it clear. I pulled out the bank records next. "This is our joint account," I said, pointing to the transfers. "And this is where the money went." A new account number. Lauren's name on it. Opened months ago, right around the same time the Tuesday gaps started showing up. The timing wasn't random. It never is. Lauren's crying got quieter, like her body finally realized tears weren't going to erase paper. Richard leaned forward, squinting at the page. What is this?" he stammered. His voice cracked on the last word. I slid one more sheet across the table. Deposit after deposit, regular, measured, from Evan. That's when Lauren stopped looking like a wounded victim and started looking like what she was, caught. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult her. I just said it, clean and final, so everyone heard it the same way. "This isn't romance," I told them. "This is fraud." And the room went so quiet you could hear Elaine's breath trembling, because now it wasn't just an affair. It was money. It was intent. It was a life they couldn't defend without admitting what kind of person their daughter had become. They were still staring at the bank records like numbers might soften if they looked long enough. That's when I pulled out the last page in my folder, the one I'd saved for the end because it wasn't just evidence. It was intent. "A lease," I said, and slid it onto the table. Brooke leaned forward first, eyes scanning fast. Elaine didn't move. Richard's hand hovered like he was afraid to touch it. Lauren's crying stopped mid-breath. The names were right there in black ink. Lauren Holloway and Evan Whitmore. Downtown apartment. Luxury building. Signed. Dated 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. Not a mistake, not a moment, not we got too close. This was planning. This was them setting up a new life while I was still paying for the old one, still thinking I was protecting a home that was already being sold out from under me. Brooke's breathing turned shallow. Elaine's head dipped like she couldn't hold it up anymore. Richard's face went stiff, like the shame finally found its way into his bones. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just asked, quiet and clear, "So tell me, who's destroying the family?" And in that silence, the whole story flipped. Not in my favor, just back into the truth. Lauren's shoulders started shaking again, but it wasn't the soft, helpless kind of crying she'd been performing. This was panic, cornered, exposed. The lease had taken away her last excuse. "Okay," she choked out. "Okay. I love him." The words landed like a dull thud in my chest, not because I didn't know, because hearing it out loud makes it real in a way your gut can't prepare for. She looked up at me with wet eyes and tried to turn the knife. "You don't understand what it's like," she said. You're boring, Nathan. You're predictable. Evan makes me feel alive." For a few seconds I didn't speak. I just let that sentence hang there, so everyone could hear what she was really saying. That my steadiness was a flaw, that my loyalty was something she outgrew. It hurt, clean, sharp, but it didn't break me the way it used to. I nodded once, slow. "Alive enough to steal money?" I asked. "Alive enough to lie to me, to your parents, to everyone in this room?" She flinched like I'd slapped her with a mirror. "I wanted a marriage," I said, voice steady. "A home, not a performance." And the word boring didn't hit me this time. It just exposed her, because now it wasn't a joke at a barbecue. It was the excuse she'd been using to justify everything. The room didn't explode the way I expected. It sagged, like a roof beam finally giving up after years of quiet stress. Richard's face went from red to gray. He stared at the lease, then at Lauren, like he was trying to recognize his own daughter. When he spoke, his voice came out smaller than the man who'd tried to lecture me about family name. "Nathan, I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't know. We didn't know. We can fix this." Elaine started crying harder, real ugly crying, the kind you can't stage. "You're my son-in-law," she pleaded, reaching toward me like I was still part of the picture she wanted. "Please, don't do this. Don't throw it all away." Brooke had nothing left. The woman who'd run the barbecue like a comedy club now couldn't string a sentence together. Her mouth opened, closed, and all that confidence leaked out of her like air from a tire. Lauren looked at me like I was the last life raft in cold water. "Nathan," she whispered, over and over, like my name could rewind time. I watched them all, and for a second I felt the old pressure. Be the good guy, keep the peace, swallow the hurt. Then I remembered the table laughing, the Marriott Tuesdays, the lease dated 3 weeks ago. "No more free passes," I said, and I meant it. "I'm done negotiating my self-respect." Silence followed, heavy and clean. Lauren's breathing sounded loud in that quiet room, like she was trying to pull air through a closing door. I opened the folder again, not for more shock, but for structure. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, not as a threat, as a plan. "You have until Monday to decide how you want to handle the divorce." Elaine flinched at the word. Richard's eyes dropped. Brooke stared like she'd been slapped by reality. "Quiet and cooperative," I continued, "or loud and messy, private or public. You choose." I wasn't threatening feelings. I wasn't yelling about betrayal. I was pointing to consequences that already existed. Documents, transfers, timestamps. Truth that didn't care how sad Lauren looked today. Lauren stood up fast, voice cracking. "Nathan, please, just talk to me, please. I'll do anything." I didn't move toward her. I didn't step back either. "You already did what you wanted," I said, calm as steel. "Now you don't get to control how it ends." I walked to the door, Lauren followed, repeating my name like a prayer that wasn't being answered. At the threshold, I turned just enough to look at Brooke. "Next time," I said, voice low, "know what you're joking about." Then I stepped outside and let the door close behind me, because the next part wasn't going to happen in their living room. It was going to happen in Evan Whitmore's world. I thought it was over. I was wrong. After I left Brooke's house, I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired, like a man who finally set down a weight he didn't realize was crushing his spine. But there was still one person in this story who didn't get a choice yet: Evan's wife. It didn't take a private investigator to learn Natalie Whitmore was a pediatric nurse at the local hospital. Small towns aren't that big when you've lived in them long enough. I waited in the parking lot after the evening shift, sitting in my car with the engine off, watching nurses and techs spill out under the harsh lot lights, shoulders slumped, faces drained. People who spend all day holding other people together. When Natalie finally walked out, she looked exactly like that. Tired, steady, the kind of woman who doesn't have time for nonsense. I stepped out, kept my hands visible, and spoke like a man delivering bad news, not picking a fight. "Mrs. Whitmore, my name's Nathan Holloway. I think you know my wife, Lauren." Natalie didn't flinch. She studied me for a second and said, flat and calm, "I'm not stupid. I know something's been off." I nodded. Then I held out a manila envelope. "This explains why." She took it, but she didn't open it. She just held it like it weighed 100 pounds. We stood there with cars moving slowly behind us, headlights washing over the asphalt like waves. Natalie kept her eyes on the envelope, not on me. That told me everything. She already knew what was inside, even if she didn't know the details. "I'm not here to get revenge on you," I said, and my voice came out softer than it had in weeks. "You didn't do anything to me." She finally looked up, and her eyes were red. Not crying, just strained, like she'd been carrying suspicion around for months and it never set down. "Then why give me this?" she asked. "Because you and your kids deserve the truth," I said. "Not rumors, not half stories. Truth you can make decisions with." Her jaw tightened, the way a parent's does when they're trying not to fall apart in public. She took a slow breath, steadying herself the same way I'd steadied myself at that barbecue table. I didn't tell her what to do. I didn't ask her to destroy him. I didn't try to steer her pain into my direction. I just said, "Whatever you decide, make your family safe." Natalie gave the smallest nod, eyes wet, spine still straight. And I walked away without looking back, because the hardest, cleanest hit I could land on Evan Whitmore wasn't my anger. It was giving the truth to the person he'd been lying to the most. The call came before sunrise, the kind of hour where the world is quiet and your thoughts are loud. Unknown number. I already knew who it was. Evan's voice sounded wrecked, raw, thin, nothing like the guy who parked his Porsche like a trophy. "She's filing," he blurted. "Natalie's filing for divorce. She froze the accounts. She's taking the kids. He stopped, like the words hurt to say out loud. I sat on the edge of my mattress in that silent studio and let him talk himself empty. Then I said, almost gently, "Stressful, huh?" He snapped back into anger because it was the only armor he had left. "You think you're smart? I'll sue you. I'll ruin you. You have no idea who you're messing with." I didn't laugh. I didn't taunt him. "Sue me for what, Evan?" I asked. "Telling facts? Handing evidence to the person you've been lying to?" He started to swear, but it didn't have the old confidence in it. It sounded like panic trying to pretend it was power. "Actions have consequences," I said, slow and clean. "You don't get to take what you want and call it living." And then he went quiet, because he finally understood he wasn't losing a car or a job. He was losing his name, his family, his whole image. A couple hours later, Mark called me. "Get down to the pub," he said. "Now. You need to see this." Donovan's was strangely busy for a weekday morning, like half the town had decided coffee wasn't strong enough. The TV over the bar was turned up. People stood shoulder to shoulder, eyes locked on the screen. Local news, premier properties, an internal audit, ethical violations. The words scrolled like a sentence being read out loud. Then the footage cut to the front doors of the building. Evan Whitmore walked out first, stiff and pale, jaw clenched like he was trying to hold his face together. Right behind him was Lauren, my wife, eyes glassy, cheeks hollow, looking like someone had yanked the floor out from under her and left her standing in midair. For 1 second, she glanced toward the camera like she was hoping the whole world would look away. Mark leaned close, voice low. "What did you do, man?" I watched the screen, felt nothing triumphant, just tired. I didn't do anything, I said. I just stopped pretending. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You win. We're leaving town. I stared at it, then typed back, I'm just done. I drove back to my studio after the pub, and for the first time in weeks, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like space. The mattress was still on the floor. The folding chair was still crooked. My folder of documents sat on the counter like a finished job. Ugly, necessary, done. I opened my notebook and stared at the blank page where I used to sketch drainage lines and load paths. Funny how a man can spend his life building things for other people and still forget to build something that protects him. I thought I was saving the marriage by staying steady. What I was really doing was teaching everyone around me that my respect was negotiable. And that's what I finally understood. It was never about the money. Not really. It was about survival, keeping a roof over my head, protecting what I worked for, keeping myself from getting financially wrecked by someone else's choices. It was about love, too, the hard lesson that love can't live on top of lies, no matter how pretty the smile is. And it was about dignity, the kind you don't get from a title or a car, but from being able to look in the mirror and not feel small. I didn't destroy their lives. I stopped pretending their choices didn't matter. Now I want to hear from you. Who's in the wrong here? Team Nathan or Team Lauren? Drop it in the comments and tell me why. If this story hit you, share this video with someone who needs it and subscribe, because this was the demolition. The rebuild is next.